Hi, welcome to another episode of Create, Inspire, Convert. This week we're continuing our series where we're talking about how to bring your business online. If you remember last time, we talked about how to get your mindset in the right place as you pivot yourself from being only brick and mortar to having a presence online as well. That involved thinking about your business with a fresh perspective. It meant thinking about it as if it's in a relaunch period, where you're pivoting and seeing what can work now, what can be tabled, and what can be held for later. It also meant revisiting those long-term goals and seeing what works right now and what maybe you need to let go of and save for another time. Today, what we're going to talk about is setting up something called your tech stack. We're just going to hit the surface level on this because your tech stack actually involves everything ranging from your hosting to your email platform to any social media scheduling tools that you use. Today, what we're going to cover is just getting together that e-commerce platform so that you are ready to receive orders, whether it's for products or services online from customers and clients. Now, there's a few things I want you to think about if you have kind of been resistant to the idea of moving your business online. The first thing is when you are limited to a physical location, whether that's an actual brick and mortar retail store or an office space where you sell or offer your services, you're limited by your geographic location and the people who live in that area. When you go online, you open up your business to a whole wider variety of locations you can appear in and people that you can get in front of. It's pretty exciting. The second thing to think about when you're moving your business online is that if you've ever had to merchandise your shelves, meaning you are constantly having to bring out new product or adjust product or redecorate or whatever it may look like for your business, that doesn't exist to the same degree with an online store. It's very simple to redecorate your online store just by switching up the colors or changing the template or featuring certain products instead of others. It's a very quick and easy process. And even if you're not a product-based store and you instead offer services, the same thing applies. You can feature certain services and not others. You can change your template if you need to. It's very quick and easy to take care of. And then the third thing I want you to think about when it comes to moving your business online is this whole scheduling and availability point. You can now effectively operate 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, or however you want your hours to be set up. You can do that with an online store. You're no longer limited by a physical presence. You can be always on if that makes sense for your business, or you can expand your hours if that makes sense for your business. All right, so now that we've covered that, let's talk about actually getting into the weeds and a few items to consider when you're weighing your options of the different e-commerce softwares that are out there. Now, if you were to Google top e-commerce platforms, you would probably come up with a list like Shopify, Wix, BigCommerce, Squarespace, WooCommerce, all those kinds of things. All of them are really good in their own way, but we're going to talk about some general recommendations to consider as you weigh all of these different options. And while we're talking about this, I'll share what my favorite tools are to use as well. Okay, so the very first thing to consider is the template options for the software that you choose. Pretty much every single e-commerce software system out there offers some form of template or a website builder. You want to look for something that is super simple, easy to use, and has a wide variety of options. Most of the time, they're organized by industry. So you want to find a software that has templates that can work well for consumer goods if you're in that space, or consulting services if you're in that space. And you want to make sure that it has some kind of drag and drop builder that's very simple and intuitive and easy to use. So if you need to make quick updates to your site, you're not having to contact a web designer or go into the back end and adjust some coding. Okay, now after you have figured out, if it has the templates that you want to look specifically to make sure that the templates are customizable. Most of the time they are, but sometimes you might be locked into a template that has very little customization options. The things you want to be able to customize are your colors and adding in your own logo at the very least. Optionally, it would be super nice to be able to customize the fonts too, especially if you use specialized fonts. Okay, now after you've considered that, the other thing that you want to figure out is how mobile friendly is the template builder, or how mobile friendly is the software in general. Look for words like responsive. If the software platform has the word responsive in the description or as part of the features that it offers, that means it's already designed to work well on mobile. And this is super important, especially in 2020 and going forward, which is actually my next consideration for you to think about in general, is how mobile responsive is this platform that you're thinking of using. because you want to make sure that your e-commerce store is looking good, not just on desktop, but mainly on mobile. According to eMarketer, which is a leading research firm, in 2018, the stat showed an upward trend of 39.6% of e-commerce sales coming from mobile. Now, they forecasted that by 2021, that stat would move up to 53.3%. Of course, what they couldn't foresee was some kind of global catastrophe where basically everyone is looking at their phone all the time. So I don't even know what those numbers look like right now, but I do know with my own clients that I work with, more than half of the traffic that goes to their website comes from mobile devices. So it's incredibly important to make sure that that template, your whole e-commerce platform, from the way that it looks when you land on the homepage to the way that you interact with the products to the way that you check out, is optimized for mobile. Okay, now here's one other consideration for mobile, just in case you weren't already convinced. Google will eliminate you from a mobile search result if your site is not mobile friendly. And if you think about what I just said about how most people, more than half, are on their phones doing Google searches, looking for things to purchase, if your website is not optimized for mobile, you don't get to appear in those keyword search results, which is a huge bummer. Now, here's my recommendation for a software system now that we've kind of talked about these couple points. If you're a smaller shop and you aren't planning on doing a ton of online business, a software like Shopify is pretty easy to use and get set up right away. If you want a more robust system that you think you're going to leverage long-term, or just something more dynamic that has a lot of functionality, I have two recommendations for you. The first is BigCommerce, which I've used with a small business and at an enterprise level. It's very adaptable, easy to use, has a ton of integrations, and is really just awesome and easy to get set up with. The other is a little bit of a more robust option. If you have an existing domain that you already use, you can install WordPress onto your domain. Most web hosts offer WordPress software installation. And then once you've got WordPress installed, you can integrate WooCommerce onto that and use WooCommerce as your e-commerce system. WooCommerce has a ton of plugins that go along with it. It's highly customizable. So I would totally recommend that if you're a medium or a large business and you want a lot of options. And if you also want to use your existing domain and you think you might want to use other features later down the road, like a blog or something like that. So we've talked about the templates that you're going to use. We've talked about the software. You've gotten my recommendations on those. Your software is going to be the place where you add all of your products. Now, a product can be, of course, a physical product. It can also be a service. Once you've got all of that set up and you've organized it in a way that makes sense for your business, you've got an awesome mobile-friendly image on there, a description that clearly states what the person can expect when they purchase the product or service. The next thing that you're going to want to do is have a payment option. So to have a payment option, most of these e-commerce softwares will have a payment integration. There are lots of different options for payment integrators. A lot of them you've probably already heard of. PayPal is the first one that comes to mind. Stripe is another major one. A few others are PayJunction, WePay, 2Checkout, and Braintree, which is actually owned by PayPal. Now, some of these have monthly fees or a small fee per transaction, so you'll want to price compare to see what makes sense for your budget and where your business is. But you've got to have at least one of these in order to collect any form of payment from your customer. My recommendation at bare minimum is to start with PayPal and Stripe. These are the two easiest ones to get started with, and they also are the most widely used. Probably everybody has a PayPal account, and Stripe handles everything else if someone doesn't have a PayPal account. Now, a few final considerations when you're thinking of your payment gateways. Just double check that they accept all major credit cards, because if they don't, you're going to be limited in who can check out. Another consideration harkens back to what we talked about earlier when you were thinking about those long-term goals. Let's say, for example, you're a store that has a loyalty card, or you think later you might want to offer some kind of subscription service. A lot of these payment gateways have built-in functionality that can support that. Square is one that comes to mind. Stripe also has that ability, and so does PayPal. So definitely check that if that's something that's important for your business. Now, the last thing I want you to really think about is when you're checking all of the forms of payment that are available through these different payment integrations, double check that they have support for digital wallet. Now, you probably know what digital wallet is, but just in case you don't, it's another word for Apple Pay or Android Pay or Google Pay, Amazon Pay, Samsung Pay. Everybody's got a pay version these days, don't they? Now you might be thinking, why wouldn't my customers just use their credit card? They're sitting there on their phone. They could probably just grab their credit card. Well, if they're sitting there on their Apple iPhone and they've got Apple Pay set up, their phone can handle all of that for them, which means they don't even have to get up from their seat to go find their credit card. Now, I can't tell you, just as a consumer, how many times I've abandoned a sale because I had to get up, go find my credit card, and I didn't feel like doing it, even though I really wanted whatever it was that person was purchasing. Which leads me to the overarching theme of this whole consideration around payment integration and checkout. You've got to make the process as seamless and simple as possible, which means the less what's called friction comes up between your customer actually making it to the purchase confirmation screen, the better. So if you can integrate those digital wallet features, go for it, because that is one less step that your customer has to go through before they finally finalize their purchase. A couple other things related to that. I have seen people who have payment forms that walk you through like 10 separate steps before you finally get to put your payment information in. Make sure that the checkout page design, which is controlled through your e-commerce platform, is as simplistic as you can possibly get it. At bare minimum, you would obviously have a one-step checkout, which means when the checkout page loads, every field that they need to fill out is there. Email address, create a password if you want to set up an account, shipping, billing, input your payment information, done. If you want to be a little bit more strategic, you can have at most a two-step checkout. A two-step checkout means when the checkout page loads, first they put in their email address and maybe a password. Then they click the next button. And on the next page that appears is when they put in all the other information, shipping, billing, payment, and then they press confirm. Now, the reason a two-step checkout is a little bit more strategic is you've just captured their email address on that very first step. So if they abandon cart, in other words, if they X out of the page because they get distracted or they just forget to check out, you have their email address. And that leads us to the very final consideration when you're thinking about a platform to choose for your e-commerce store. Does it have the capability for abandoned cart? If it does, you definitely want to take advantage of that. That's what we just talked about, this two-step checkout system. If you have that email address and they've abandoned cart or they've left the page and they did not complete purchase, your e-commerce platform can trigger an automated abandoned cart sequence. Now, this is an email that you can customize in your settings, and it automatically sends after a certain period of time. You decide that period of time, but most often it's 24 hours. And it's a very simple email. I'm sure you've gotten them before from other retailers. It just goes to their inbox and says, hey, I think you forgot to purchase this. And it can have embedded in the body of an email the product that they had almost started to purchase. It's just a little nudge or a reminder saying, hey, do you want to go ahead and grab this? And sometimes you can offer a coupon code or some other incentive to get them to come back and finish purchase. Okay, now that pretty much wraps it up. So just as a quick recap, we've talked about how you want to consider the template or the design experience of the e-commerce platform system. Does it have the capability to be fully customizable? Can you add in your brand fonts and colors and logo? And is it mobile responsive above all? We also talked about the payment gateways you want to offer. At bare minimum, you want to look at PayPal and Stripe. You want to make sure you have the ability to accept digital wallet, and you want to simplify your checkout design as much as possible. Either a one-step checkout or at maximum, a two-step checkout where step one is you collect an email address and step two is they finish the payment. And that's it. Now, as a reminder from our last episode where we talked about getting your mindset in the right place, reframing your goals, and looking at it from a relaunching perspective, I gave you the link to a workbook. That workbook covered just those first few steps. Well, now the workbook has access to the steps associated with this episode. So you can still visit the same URL, which is createinspireconvert.com/workbook, and download the next version of the workbook that has all the new steps associated with setting up your e-commerce platform. And in there, I go a little bit deeper into the points we covered today. Plus, I give you links to some of the tools I shouted out, like BigCommerce, WooCommerce, and all that type of thing. All right, that wraps it up. If you haven't already yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode where we're going to talk about how you can take advantage of multi-channel selling, which means selling through not just your e-commerce platform, but through social media and maybe even through Amazon if your store qualifies for it. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.